Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
Ash fell like snow, settling over the destroyed outpost in a thin gray layer. The silence pressed against Sari's eardrums. An unnatural, watchful silence, broken only by the cooling metal's occasional creak and the soft crunch of debris beneath her boots. Captain Sari Meridian moved through the ruins slowly and methodically, weapon ready. Each step was calculated, every glance deliberate. Her tactical visor showed no movement within scan range, but she didn't trust the technology anymore. Not after what happened at Outpost 14, not after what they found there. The eastern section of the base lay in ruins, walls peeled back like the skin of a fruit, exposing the inner workings of what had once been a bustling communications hub. Twisted metal groaned overhead as she ducked beneath a partially collapsed doorway. The smell hit her first. Burned insulation and plastic, but beneath it, something organic, something human. "Clear left," she murmured into her comm, the words automatic after 15 years of service. The ritual of clearing rooms provided comfort in a situation growing increasingly unpredictable. "Clear right," came Narissa's response, his voice tight with tension. The young scout moved with the nervous energy of prey, sensing a predator. His eyes darted to every shadow, every corner. They proceeded deeper into the compound, past scorched equipment and abandoned workstations. No bodies yet, which struck Sari as wrong. The evacuation alarm hadn't been triggered according to the logs. Where was everyone? The main communications room appeared largely intact, its reinforced walls having withstood whatever devastation had claimed the rest of the base. The door stood ajar, emergency lighting casting long shadows across the floor. Sari held up a closed fist, "Halt," then signaled Naris to cover her as she approached. The room beyond was dark, power cut to all but the most essential systems. A single terminal blinked with an intermittent green light, casting an eerie glow over the scene. And there, slumped against the rusted comms console, she saw it. A dead officer, Lieutenant Karim, according to his name patch. Blood had pooled beneath him, dry now, dark and flaking. On his chest plate, carved by knife with surgical precision. Sari knelt, examining the body without touching it. The cuts were clean, deliberate, not the work of someone in a frenzy. The lieutenant's eyes remained open, fixed on some distant point, his expression one of recognition rather than surprise. He'd seen his killer coming. "That's the third in 3 days," Naris said, his voice barely above a whisper. The young scout had moved to the doorway, keeping his distance from the corpse. His normally bronze skin had taken on an ashen quality, making the scar across his left cheek stand out starkly. Sari traced the air above the bloodline curving into the number, careful not to contaminate evidence. Same pattern as the others. Same depth to the cuts. Same positioning. She cocked her head, studying the dried blood trails. "He's been bleeding with each kill. Running for 3 days straight." She shook her head. "He should be dead from blood loss alone." Naris backed away slowly, the whites of his eyes visible all around his irises. "No, he is hunting us now." The words hung in the stale air between them, weighted with implication. 3 officers dead in 3 days, each marked with their number and sequence. Someone was working through a list. Sari stood brushing imaginary dust from her knees, a nervous habit from childhood she'd never managed to break. "Check the logs. I want to know when communications went down." She moved to the opposite console, initiating her override codes to access the emergency power reserves. The system sputtered, displays flickering to life before dimming again. Something was wrong with the power distribution. "Captain," Norris called, his voice strange. "These logs show the base was fully operational until 6 hours ago. No distress calls, no evacuation orders, nothing. That's not possible. Look at the damage outside. That happened days ago, not hours. I'm just reporting what—" Naris stopped mid-sentence, eyes fixed on something behind her. Sari turned, following his gaze to the security monitor. It showed a corridor, this corridor, recorded 6 hours earlier. A figure moved with deliberate purpose through the frame, face obscured by a hood. In one hand, a knife. In the other, what appeared to be a small canister. "Is that him? Is that Elias?" Narissa's voice had dropped to a whisper. Before she could answer, the base power flickered violently. Light strobed, then died completely. In the sudden darkness, Ceri's tactical light activated automatically, its beam cutting through the blackness to reveal something that hadn't been there moments before. A line of red paint appearing on the floor, still wet, leading deeper into the facility. Ceri knelt, touched a finger to the substance. It came away sticky and warm. Not paint, blood. He's still here, she breathed, the realization like ice in her veins. He's watching us right now. The security monitors flickered once more before dying completely, but not before showing a final image. A hooded figure standing directly behind the camera, looking directly into it, directly at them. In the field tent, chaos reigned supreme. Maps lay torn down from tactical boards, scattered across tables where officers shouted over one another, fingers jabbing at different locations on a holographic terrain model. The atmosphere crackled with tension, and the acrid smell of too many stimulant tablets dissolved in too much synthetic coffee. 3 bases in 3 days, Commander Vex bellowed, his weathered face flushed with anger as he slammed a meaty fist onto the projection table. The hologram flickered, mountains and valleys rippling like water. How is one man doing this? How is he outmaneuvering an entire security division? Ceri stood at the periphery, arms crossed, watching the command staff dissolve into increasingly desperate theories. The trail they'd been following was erratic. Elias changed direction constantly, doubling back, splitting off, sometimes seemingly in 2 places at once. Almost as if he were circling them, studying their patterns, learning their responses. He's toying with us, Major Lawrence said, her thin fingers tracing the chaotic path markers. Playing some kind of game. It's not a game, Ceri finally spoke, her voice cutting through the noise. The tent fell silent as all eyes turned to her. It's a hunt, and we're not the hunters. Commander Vex's eyes narrowed. Explain, Captain. Ceri stepped forward, bringing up Elias's personnel file on the main display. A nondescript face looked back at them. Lean features, close-cropped hair, eyes that revealed nothing. Prisoner number 471, captured during the border skirmishes 2 years earlier. Elias Ward, 34 years old, served as a logistics cook for the detention center at Processing Station 9. She scrolled through the meager information. No combat training, no infiltration skills, no history of violence before his escape. Yet he's killed 3 officers and evaded capture for 72 hours, Vex countered. You're wrong, Naris's voice came from the tent entrance. All eyes turned to him as he approached, placing a data chip on the table. I pulled this from the Outpost 16 archives before we evacuated. The projection shifted, grainy security footage replacing Elias's file. The timestamp showed 2 days earlier. The image showed a corridor similar to the one they'd just left, but intact, fully operational. A figure moved into frame, Elias, though his face remained partially obscured. The footage played in silence. Elias entered the base through what appeared to be a maintenance hatch, movements fluid, purposeful. He slipped past camera after camera, pausing occasionally as if counting seconds. 3 guards passed within meters of him, yet somehow failed to notice his presence. Not once did he attempt to engage or eliminate any personnel he encountered. The final shot showed him approaching a wall near the command center, applying something from a small canister. When he moved away, a marking was visible. He's not soft, Naris said, eyes locked with Ceri's across the table. He's choosing who dies. The tent fell silent as the implications settled over the group. Ceri looked away, unwilling to process what this meant. He doesn't get to choose, she said finally, voice hardening. He's a prisoner. A fugitive. Our orders are to bring him in or put him down. Personal vendetta doesn't factor into it. Doesn't it? Naris challenged. 3 officers dead. All senior staff, all serving together during the border conflict. All marked with their position in some sequence. He leaned forward. That's not random, Captain. That's a message. Commander Vex cleared his throat. What's your assessment, Captain Meridian? You've been tracking him since the beginning. Ceri felt the weight of all eyes on her. Her reputation for level-headed analysis had carried her through 15 years of service. She wouldn't abandon it now for superstition and fear. He's just a man, she said firmly. Clever, yes. Motivated, certainly. But human, fallible, trackable. She turned to the terrain model. He's staying within a 50-kilometer radius of the original processing station. That suggests he's looking for something specific, or someone. The next target, Major Lawrence suggested. Possibly, but he's injured, losing blood with each engagement. He's getting desperate, making mistakes. Sari zoomed in on a particular sector. I recommend we focus our search here, near Outpost 7. It's the only remaining installation within his operational radius that houses senior staff from the border conflict. Commander Vex nodded slowly. Make it happen. I want a strike team ready in 30 minutes. He looked around the room. Dismissed. As the officers filtered out, Naris lingered, waiting until they were alone. You don't really believe what you said, he stated, not a question but an observation, about him being just a man. Sari began gathering her equipment, not meeting his gaze. What I believe doesn't matter. What matters is completing the mission without further casualties. And if you're wrong, if he's more than we understand, she paused, hand resting on her sidearm, then we adapt. That's what soldiers do. Naris moved closer, voice dropping. Have you considered that maybe he has a reason for targeting these specific officers? It doesn't matter if he has a reason, Sari snapped. The law doesn't work that way. Justice doesn't work that way. Doesn't it? Naris pressed. What if? Enough, she cut him off. Prep the transport. We move in 20. Alone in her quarters, Sari allowed herself 5 minutes of stillness. 5 minutes to question everything she'd said with such certainty. Elias's file didn't make sense. A cook doesn't become a ghost overnight. A prisoner doesn't develop the skills to evade military tracking without training. She was missing something. Something important. As she moved to retrieve her tactical gear, she noticed an envelope on her bunk. Simple. White. Sealed. Her name written in precise lettering that matched no one on her team. Her heart rate spiked. She drew her sidearm, sweeping the small room quickly. Empty. The ventilation system hummed steadily, masking any sounds of an intruder. How had someone entered her private quarters undetected? With her weapon in one hand, she carefully opened the envelope with the other. Inside, a list. Names. 10 of them, including Commander Vex and Major Lorne. 7 were crossed out, including the 3 officers already confirmed dead. Her name was at the bottom. Sari's blood ran cold as she realized she wasn't hunting a fugitive anymore. She was hunting an executioner, and she was on his list. Dawn broke over the transport vessel, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain below. Sari stood at the observation port, watching the landscape blur beneath them. Sleep had eluded her entirely, the list burning a hole in her tactical vest where she'd hidden it. She hadn't shared its existence with anyone, not even Naris, especially not Naris, whose questions grew more pointed with each passing hour. 2 minutes to drop, the pilot's voice crackled over the comm. Sensors show minimal activity at the outpost. Acknowledged, Sari replied, turning to face her team. 6 soldiers, handpicked for their tracking abilities and combat experience. Naris stood apart from them, checking his gear with methodical precision. Listen up, she addressed the group. We go in quiet, non-lethal tactics where possible. I want Elias alive. She looked each of them in the eye. Questions? A veteran named Keller raised his hand. Intel says this guy's killed 3 officers already. Why are we pulling punches? A fair question. One Sari had asked herself repeatedly throughout the night. Because dead men can't answer questions, she replied evenly. And I have a lot of questions. The transport descended toward a clearing a kilometer from the outpost. Recent satellite imagery showed the facility intact. But Sari knew better than to trust technology when Elias had already proven capable of manipulating systems. They approached on foot, moving through dense underbrush with practiced silence. The outpost appeared abandoned at first glance. No movement, no lights, no signs of the 20-person staff that should have been operating the communications relay. Something's wrong, Naris murmured beside her as they reached the perimeter fence. It's too quiet. Sari nodded, signaling the team to hold position while she and Naris approached the main entrance. The security panel showed green, unlocked, which violated every protocol. Inside, emergency lighting cast the corridors in an amber glow. No signs of struggle, no bodies, just an emptiness that felt more ominous than any battlefield Sari had ever walked. They cleared rooms methodically, finding each one abandoned. Personal effects remained in quarters. Meals half-eaten in the mess hall, terminals still logged into personnel accounts. It's like they just vanished, Naris whispered. The command center door stood open. Sari signaled Naris to cover her as she entered, weapon raised. What she found stopped her cold. A man sat bound to a chair in the center of the room, alive, trembling. Lieutenant Merrick, according to his name patch. His uniform was disheveled but showed no signs of blood or struggle. "Captain," he croaked upon seeing her, relief flooding his features. "Thank God." Sari approached cautiously, scanning for traps. "What happened here, Lieutenant? Where is everyone?" "He cleared the outpost," Merrick replied, voice shaking, pulled the fire alarm, then announced over the comms that the reactor was going critical. "Everyone evacuated to the emergency bunkers 2 kilometers south." He swallowed hard. "Then he found me, separated me from the others." Sari began cutting his restraints. "Why you?" The lieutenant's eyes went distant, haunted. He looked at me like I was nothing. Just said, "You just drove the truck. You had a choice. Would you have turned around?" And then he left. Merrick's hands trembled as the restraints fell away. "I don't know what he meant. I was just following orders." Sari offered him water from her canteen, mind racing. "Did he say anything else? About where he was going next?" "He asked if I knew what happened to the settlement." "Which settlement? I don't know." Merrick took a shuddering breath. When I couldn't answer, he just nodded, like he already knew I wouldn't know. "Why did he leave you alive?" Naris asked from the doorway, suspicion evident in his tone. Marek looked up, confusion plain on his face. "He said I was an exception, that I was just following orders, not making them." His eyes darted between them. "What does that mean?" "What is this about?" Sari exchanged a glance with Naris. "We'll debrief fully at command. Right now, I need you to tell me how long ago he left and which direction." "Maybe 2 hours. Headed east, toward the canyon system." Merrick hesitated. "Captain, he left something for you. Said you'd be coming." He gestured toward the central console. On it sat a small data drive, labeled simply Truth. Back on the transport, with Merrick safely transferred to medical care, and the rest of the outpost personnel located unharmed, Sari sat alone in the tactical planning room. The data drive weighed heavy in her palm. Standard protocol dictated that unknown drives should be processed through security before access. Standard protocol also dictated that she report the list with her name on it. She had followed protocol her entire career, until now. She inserted the drive into her personal terminal, bypassing the vessel's main systems. The screen flickered, then displayed a single document. Operation Directive 27. Her blood ran cold. The directive was classified, accessible only to those with alpha-level clearance. She had signed it 3 years ago, along with 9 other senior officers, the same 10 names on Elias's list. The document detailed the neutralization of insurgent elements along the contested border, surgical strikes against settlements suspected of harboring enemy combatants. The operations had been conducted with minimal publicity, the casualties classified. What the directive didn't mention, what Sari had never been told, was that the intelligence was fabricated. Falsified reports, manipulated data. The settlements had contained no insurgents, no weapons caches, no strategic threats, just civilians, families, children. Attached to the directive was a personnel file, Elias Ward, civilian medical technician, resident of Settlement Echo, listed as deceased in the operation report. The same Elias Ward later registered as prisoner number 471, captured during border skirmishes 2 years after his supposed death. A new order appeared in her messages requiring her signature to authorize another covert operation in the same region. Her hand moved automatically toward the stylus, then stopped. Her fingers hovered over the screen, trembling slightly. She set the stylus down and pushed it away. For the first time in 15 years, Captain Sari Meridian couldn't sign. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Naris entered without waiting for permission, his expression grim. "We've plotted the most likely route through the canyon," he reported, laying a datapad before her. "If we push, we can intercept him before nightfall." Sari nodded mechanically, still processing what she'd learned. Naris studied her face. "You found something on that drive." Not a question. An observation from someone who'd become attuned to her expressions over months of working together. "If we find him," she said finally, choosing her words with care, "we take him alive." Naris's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's a change from dead or alive this morning. Consider it new intelligence requiring adjusted tactics." He didn't press, but his eyes reflected understanding beyond his years. "I'll inform the team." As he turned to leave, Sari noticed something odd. Nerys moved to the equipment locker, opening it to retrieve additional gear. When he opened a side panel on the wall to access the reserve ammunition clips, he suddenly froze. "What is it?" she asked, rising from her seat. Nerys didn't answer immediately. He stared at something inside the panel, then slowly stepped back. Carved into the metal interior of the panel, his own name. 9. The question mark was fresh, the metal shaving still visible on the locker floor. Their eyes met across the room, a silent understanding passing between them. Elias wasn't just one step ahead of them. He was on this very transport. The canyon stretched before them like an ancient wound in the earth, layers of red and ochre stone telling stories of geological time that made human conflict seem fleeting by comparison. Sari led the team through a narrow passage, each step carefully placed on loose shale that threatened to announce their presence with every movement. The tracker in her palm pulsed softly, a beacon signal from the transport. After discovering Narys's name in the locker, they had initiated full lockdown protocols, searching every compartment, every possible hiding place. They found nothing. No trace of Elias, yet the evidence of his presence remained undeniable. Commander Vex had ordered them to continue the pursuit regardless. "He's playing mind games," the commander had said. "Don't let him dictate the terms of engagement." Easy words from someone safely back at headquarters, Sari thought bitterly. The commander's name had been fourth on the list. She wondered if he knew. "Movement ahead," Keller whispered, raising a closed fist. The team halted, dropping into defensive positions behind rock formations. Through her tactical scope, Sari spotted a plume of smoke rising from beyond the next ridge. Thin, controlled, not the billowing black of a structure fire, but the deliberate smoke of a signal or cooking fire. "Could be a trap," Nerys murmured beside her. "Could be," she agreed. "Or it could be an invitation." She made her decision quickly. "Keller, take crews and circle north. Barton and Jenkins, south. Establish perimeter, but do not engage unless directly threatened." She turned to Nerys. "You're with me." Direct approach. The young scout's eyes widened slightly. "You think that's wise?" "No," she admitted, "but I think it's necessary." They moved forward slowly, weapons at the ready but not raised aggressively. As they crested the ridge, the source of the smoke came into view. Outpost 7, or what remained of it. The facility had been reduced to twisted metal and collapsed concrete. Everything burned to ash. The destruction was comprehensive, yet controlled. Not the random devastation of an explosion, but the methodical annihilation of a surgical strike. "This happened days ago," Nerys said, examining the cooled edges of the rubble. "But that smoke—" A figure stood at the center of the destruction, beside a small fire pit that produced the thin column of smoke they'd spotted. He didn't turn as they approached, didn't acknowledge their presence in any way. "Elias Ward," Sari called, keeping her voice steady, "we're here to bring you in." The man remained motionless for several heartbeats, then slowly turned to face them. He looked nothing like his personnel photo. Thinner, harder. His eyes reflected the firelight like those of a predator in darkness. "Captain Meridian," he replied, voice rough from disuse. "Directive 27, Signatory 10. His gaze shifted. "And Scout Nerys Dahl. You weren't there. You're not on the list." "There doesn't need to be any more violence," Sari said, taking a careful step forward. "Come with us willingly. Tell your story to the proper authorities." A sound escaped Elias, something between a laugh and a cough. The proper authorities. He gestured to the destruction around them. They were the proper authorities. Senior staff, decorated officers. His voice hardened. Murderers with clean hands. Sari felt Nerys tense beside her, ready to act if Elias made any threatening move. But the man simply knelt, placing his hand on the ash-covered ground. "Do you know what this was, Captain? Before you and 9 others signed its death warrant?" "A military installation," she answered automatically. "A settlement," he corrected. "Settlement Echo. Population 412. Civilians. Farmers. Medical workers." His fingers curled into the ash. "Families." The silence that followed felt physical, pressing against Sari's chest like a weight. "There were insurgents," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Intelligence confirmed weapon stockpiles, communications with enemy forces. Lies, Elias replied simply. Fabricated intelligence to justify clearing land for a military corridor. No insurgents, no weapons. He stood, ash falling from his fingers. Just people who happened to be in the way. He turned, walking toward a large metal door that had survived the destruction relatively intact, carved into its surface with what must have been hours of painstaking effort, and beneath it, some orders can't be unsent. Norris shifted nervously. Captain, we should call the others in. This is... Wait, Sari ordered, studying Elias's movements. He carried no visible weapons, made no threatening gestures. Let him talk. Talk won't bring back the dead, Elias said, returning to the small fire. He knelt, retrieving something from the ashes. 3 years I've lived with their ghosts. 3 years of planning, of waiting. He held out his hand. In it lay 3 dog tags, their metal surfaces darkened by fire but still legible. These belong to the officers stationed here, he continued. Numbers 5, 6, and 7 on my list. They died quickly. More mercy than they showed us. Sari approached cautiously, taking the tags from his outstretched hand. 2 names she recognized from the list. The third made her blood run cold. Tomas Meridian, her brother. Sari froze completely. The dog tag with her brother's name burned in her palm. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, as if time itself had stopped. The world around her faded to nothing. The rubble, the fire, even Naris's voice calling from somewhere far away. Captain? Captain. She heard nothing, saw nothing but the name etched into metal. Her brother. Here. Part of this. This isn't possible, she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. My brother was a civilian doctor. He never served. He died in a transport accident near the outer colonies. Is that what they told you? Elias asked, something like pity crossing his features. Thomas Meridian, Chief Medical Officer assigned to verify casualties after Operation Directive 27. He saw the bodies, counted them, realized they were civilians, not insurgents. He met her gaze steadily. He was going to report it. They couldn't allow that. The world seemed to tilt beneath Sari's feet. Her brother's death had never made sense. A routine transport flight, perfect weather conditions, an experienced pilot, the sealed casket at the funeral, the military honor guard despite his civilian status. You're lying, she said, but there was no force behind the words. Read his report, Elias replied, producing a small data chip. His final report, never filed. I found it on his body when I dug my way out of the mass grave they threw us in. Naris had gone pale, eyes darting between them. Captain, we need to call this in, now. Sari ignored him, taking the chip with trembling fingers. If what you're saying is true, why not go public? Why this hunt? I tried going public, Elias answered, bitterness seeping into his tone. I was arrested as an insurgent, imprisoned for 2 years. No trial, no communication with the outside world. He looked into the fire. That's when I realized the system doesn't fix itself. The people who broke it have to be removed. Naris had backed away several paces, hand hovering near his weapon. Captain, he's confessing to premeditated murder. We need to split up, Sari interrupted, her decision made in an instant. Cover more ground. That's suicide, Naris argued, eyes wide with disbelief. He's picking off officers one by one. Then he'll find me first, Sari said, checking her weapon. And this ends. She activated her comm. All units, fall back to the transport. Await further orders. Captain, Naris began, but she cut him off with a sharp gesture. That's an order, Scout. Naris hesitated, conflict evident in his expression, before finally turning away. He cast one last glance at Elias, then disappeared over the ridge. Alone with the man who had systematically hunted her colleagues, Sari felt strangely calm. What happens now? Elias looked at her thoughtfully. That depends on you, Captain, on what you do with the truth. He turned, walking away into the canyon. He carried no weapon, made no threats, simply walked away, leaving her standing amid the ashes of what she now realized was a massacre site. Sari looked down at the dog tags in her palm, at her brother's name, etched into metal that had survived fire and time. The weight of it felt heavier than any weapon she'd ever carried. She had a choice to make. The canyon walls rose like sentinels around Sari as she tracked Elias through the winding passages. She had dismissed her team, sending them back to the transport with orders to wait 24 hours before reporting her missing. Nerys had protested vehemently, but ultimately relented when she invoked command privilege. She moved alone now, following traces that seemed deliberately left for her to find. A boot print here, a disturbed stone there, breadcrumbs leading to the wolf. Her comm unit lay disabled in her pocket, her tracker deactivated. For the first time in her 15-year career, Captain Sari Meridian had gone off-grid. The decision should have terrified her, should have felt like betrayal of everything she stood for. Instead, it felt like clarity. She had reviewed the data chip during a brief rest. Her brother's report had been meticulously detailed, as everything Thomas did always was. Photographs, body counts, DNA analyses proving civilian status. Dates and times that matched perfectly with Operation Directive 27. The final entry had been made mere hours before his accident. I can no longer participate in this cover-up. The deaths at Settlement Echo were not collateral damage in a military operation. They were the point of the operation. Civilians eliminated to clear a strategic corridor. I will be submitting this report directly to the Judicial Committee at tomorrow's hearing. He never made it to that hearing. As dust settled over the canyon, painting the stone walls in deepening shades of orange and purple, Sari spotted a flicker of light ahead. A small fire, nestled between rock formations that provided both shelter and a defensive position. Smart. She approached openly, weapon holstered. No point in pretense now. Elias waited by the fire, seated on a flat stone, thin, dirty, his body bearing the evidence of years of hardship, but alive. Impossibly, defiantly alive. No weapon in hand, just a small container of what looked like ash beside him. Why, she asked, stopping at the edge of the firelight, why the elaborate game? Why not just kill us all at once? He studied her for a long moment, eyes reflecting the dancing flames. Would you have believed the truth if I'd simply told you? Or would you have dismissed it as the ravings of a prisoner? So this was about convincing me. This was about justice, he corrected. Real justice, not the kind dispensed by tribunals who answer to the same authorities who ordered the massacre. And the others? The officers you killed? They knew, he said simply. Every one of them knew what they were signing. What they were authorizing. He paused. Did you? The question hung in the air between them, heavier than any accusation. No, she admitted finally. I signed what was put in front of me. Trusted the intelligence. Trusted the system. Her voice hardened. That doesn't justify murder. Doesn't it? He countered. Your system executed 412 innocent people. What justice did they receive? He reached beside him, retrieving something wrapped in canvas. He held it out to her. Sari took it cautiously, unwrapping the fabric with one hand. Her photo, from the award ceremony 3 years ago. Her smile bright, uniform pristine. The day she signed Directive 27. In the photo, her brother stood beside her, pride evident in his expression. They had celebrated that night, her promotion, his new assignment, both believing they were serving something greater than themselves. You watch families burn, Elias said, his voice hoarse from disuse. I watched my sister vanish, along with 300 others, classified as insurgents on your authority. Understanding crashed over Sari like a physical blow. Settlement Echo, the fabricated intelligence, the civilians classified as enemy combatants, all to clear a strategic corridor for military operations. Elias reached into his pocket, withdrawing a final dog tag. He held it out to her, her name etched into the metal. You get to decide what happens now, he said quietly. Truth or more lies. Sari stared at the tag, at her name rendered in cold metal. Her finger trembled on her weapon's trigger guard. She could end this. Report that the fugitive had been neutralized. Bury the truth deeper. Continue serving a system that had already betrayed everything she thought it stood for. Instead, she slowly lowered her hand. How many survived? She asked, voice barely audible over the crackling fire. Just me, he answered, eyes distant with memory. And I died there too. The admission hung in the space between them, raw and honest. Sari could see it in his eyes. The man before her was just a shell, animated by purpose alone. When that purpose was fulfilled, what would remain? What do you want from me? She asked finally. Confession? Execution? Elias poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing into the night sky. I want you to choose. Freely. Knowing the full truth. He met her gaze across the flames. That's something the people of Echo never got. Sari sank down onto a rock opposite him, suddenly exhausted. The weight of her brother's final report, of the dog tag in her palm, of 15 years serving a system built on lies, it all crashed down at once. If I go back, she said slowly, report what I've learned. They'll bury it, Elias finished for her. Just like they buried your brother's findings. Just like they buried us. He gestured to the small container of ash beside him. This is all that's left of Settlement Echo, of my sister, of hundreds of others. And if I don't go back, then you become what I am, he said. A ghost. Someone who exists only to haunt those responsible. Sari stared into the fire, watching the flames consume the wood just as thoroughly as they had consumed the settlement. Her entire life had been built around duty, around following the chain of command. But what happened when that chain led to atrocity? There's a third option, she said finally. Elias raised an eyebrow, waiting. The truth, not whispered in dark corners or carved into dead men's armor. Broadcast, undeniable. She looked up at him. Your vengeance kills the guilty. The truth prevents new victims. Something flickered in his eyes, the first real emotion she'd seen there. Hope, perhaps, or doubt. They control the channels, he said, the networks, the narrative. Not all of them, Sari countered. Not anymore. She stood, decision made. I need to return to base, alone. Elias tensed. That's suicide. No, she said, a grim smile touching her lips. That's the mission. She extended her hand, not for a weapon, but in offering. After a moment's hesitation, Elias took it. 3 days, she said. If you don't hear anything by then. He nodded, understanding the unspoken directive. Then I finished the list. As Sari turned to leave, he called after her. Your brother, Elias said quietly. He tried to save us. Even after it was too late, he tried to make it right. He was a good man. Sari didn't turn back, but her steps faltered briefly. So were you once, she replied. Maybe we both can be again. Back at camp, silence greeted Sari like an old friend. The operations center hummed with machinery, but the personnel moved like ghosts, eyes averted as she passed. Word traveled fast in military circles. The captain who'd gone off-grid, who'd spoken with the fugitive instead of capturing him. Commander Vex waited in the central briefing room, face carved from stone. Report, Captain. Sari stood at attention, back straight, eyes forward. The perfect soldier she'd always been. Target encountered at Outpost 7, sir. He escaped during engagement. And your team? The ones you ordered to return without you? A tactical decision to prevent further casualties, sir. Vex studied her, suspicion evident in his gaze. You spent 12 hours unaccounted for, Captain. What happened during that time? Pursuit, sir. Unsuccessful. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but she maintained her composure. Years of military discipline made deception possible, if not comfortable. You're confined to base pending formal inquiry, Vex announced. Weapon and comm surrendered to security. Understood, sir. She relinquished her sidearm and communications device without protest. Dismissed. Sari turned to leave, each step measured, controlled. She could feel Vex's eyes on her back, searching for any sign of the truth she now carried. In her quarters, she found Naris waiting, perched anxiously on the edge of her desk. You're alive, he breathed, relief evident in his voice. Disappointed? She asked, only half joking. What happened out there? He lowered his voice. Did you find him? Sari checked the room for surveillance devices, standard procedure that now felt like vital necessity. Finding nothing obvious, she still kept her voice low. I found the truth, she said simply, about Directive 27, about Settlement Echo. She met his gaze. About my brother. Understanding dawned on Naris's face. The third dog tag. She nodded. They killed him to keep him quiet about the massacre. 400 civilians, Naris. Not insurgents, not combatants, families. And the other officers, the ones Elias. They knew, Sari confirmed. They all knew, and they covered it up. Nerys sank back against the desk. So what now? Reported up the chain? A bitter laugh escaped her. The chain is the problem. This goes all the way to Central Command. Then what? Sari moved to her terminal, entering her access codes. So far, they hadn't revoked her clearance, an oversight she intended to exploit. How good are you with communication systems, as she asked. Nerys blinked in surprise. I was ComTech before scout duty. Why? Because we're going to need all channels. Every network, every outpost. His eyes widened as understanding dawned. That's treason, Captain. No, she corrected, pulling up the classified files from her brother's data chip. That's duty, the real kind. For a moment, she thought he might refuse, might report her. His career was just beginning, his future bright. What she proposed would end both, regardless of outcome. Instead, he moved to the terminal. The emergency broadcast system has backdoor access codes, holdover from the war. If we route through multiple relays, it'll be harder to shut down. His fingers flew across the interface. We'll need a distraction, though. Something to keep security busy while the upload completes. Sari smiled grimly. Leave that to me. The next hours passed in a blur of preparation. Nerys worked his technical magic, creating a broadcast package that would spread across all military and civilian channels simultaneously. Sari compiled the evidence, her brother's report, the falsified intelligence that led to Directive 27, the death certificates of 400 civilians classified as enemy combatants, and her own testimony, recorded in the small hours of morning, her voice steady as she detailed her unwitting role in the atrocity. The distraction came in the form of a small fire in the fuel depot. Nothing dangerous, but enough to trigger alarms and draw security away from the communication center. In the confusion, Narration slipped into the main server room, package in hand. 5 minutes, he told Sari over their improvised comm link. Once I start the upload, there's no stopping it. Understood, she replied, positioning herself in the operations center. Commander Vex and the senior staff were coordinating the fire response. Backs turned to the main display screens. Now, she whispered. Across the base, screens flickered, went dark momentarily, then came to life with Sari's face, her voice clear and unwavering. This is Captain Sari Meridian, authorization code Alpha 739. What you are about to see is classified under Military Directive 6. I am releasing it in direct violation of orders. The operations center fell silent as all eyes turned to the screens, then to Sari, standing calmly in their midst. This is what we did, her recorded voice continued as documents began to scroll across the screen. This is who we became. The files spread like wildfire across all networks, military channels, civilian broadcasts, private communications, unstoppable just as they'd planned. The truth finally unleashed. Officers rushed to terminals, frantically trying to override the broadcast. Vex bellowed orders, face purpling with rage. But it was too late. The safeguards that had kept the massacre secret for 3 years now worked against them. No single authority could halt an emergency broadcast without confirmation codes from 3 separate command centers. By the time those codes could be gathered, the entire system would know what had happened at Settlement Echo. Nerys appeared at her side, face flushed with adrenaline. It's done, he murmured. Every station, every outpost, even the civilian networks. Security converged on them, weapons drawn. Sari made no move to resist as they secured her hands behind her back. Vex approached, fury and disbelief warring on his features. Do you have any idea what you've done? He hissed. My duty, she replied simply. The one I should have done 3 years ago. As they led her away, Narration caught her eye. Was it worth it? He asked quietly. Sari looked past him to the screen still displaying the evidence, to the officers watching in shocked silence, to the truth finally laid bare. Ask me in 10 years, she answered. Somewhere beyond the mountains, Elias saw the broadcast light on an abandoned terminal blink green. The faces of the dead scrolled across the screen, not as insurgents, but as victims, named, remembered, acknowledged. He placed his hand on the screen as his sister's image appeared. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than rage. The dog tag in his pocket, the 10th one, bearing Sari's name, suddenly felt lighter. Not a death sentence anymore, but a memory, a choice made differently. The corner of his mouth twitched upward, then slowly, deliberately, A smile spread across his weathered face, the first genuine smile since Settlement Echo burned. Not a smile of victory or vengeance, but of something long forgotten. Peace. The screen faded to black, but the message remained. The truth was out now, unstoppable, beyond anyone's control. Elias turned away without a word, walking into the canyon's shadows, his silhouette growing smaller against the vast landscape until it disappeared entirely.